Once again, greetings YouTube. This time we're going to be taking a look at the new release, Priest, and well, I have a hard time classifying how I want to recommend this film, or if I want to recommend it. On the one hand, it's a rather standard but enjoyable action film with some rather interesting visuals and certainly better vampires than, let's say, certain other films out there that begin with a T and an I light. But on the other hand, you're paying extra money to see a 3D movie, which, as far as I saw, had no 3D, which basically means you're just paying extra money. I'm serious when I say that. I did not notice any 3D at all. Even if it's going for that whole, Avatar style immersive 3D, it did not immerse me in the environment. At Avatar, you really got the sense of depth from that type of 3D. This really did feel like it was just a 2D film the entire time, with me wearing glasses that darkened everything. Maybe that was a reason you couldn't see the 3D, was because of the darkness. Maybe they should have thought about that beforehand. I don't know. Now, I would normally say, but go see the 2D version, except I'm not even sure if there is a 2D version out there. The reason I say that is because right by me, there are 3 theaters that are rather easy to get to. All of them are rather large, about a dozen screens each. And not one of them had a 3D showing. Now, they had 2D showings of Thor, and other movies that are normally released in both. These theaters normally have both. Not this case, which is making me wonder if a 2D film to find is so rare, which is why I'm hesitant to recommend this. I'm almost about to say this is a movie that you probably should wait to see on Netflix, or another on-demand service, or wait for the DVD in general. Just because it's just not worth paying for the extra 3D glasses. Literally, at least with Resident Evil Afterlife, it was genuinely 3D in there. The only real noticeable 3D I noticed in Priest was the end credits. That they looked a little bit, more. They had looked like they had depth with it. The credits themselves were in front of the background in some way. Yeah, but if you really don't mind spending the extra money, then I guess we'll have to go into what the film is in general. Or if you're going to wait and see this on Netflix, who knows? Maybe this video is being watched a couple months after I've recorded it. In that case, we have the world of Priest. Now, Priest is set in this alternate world where there have always been vampires since medieval times, and they've always fought with humans, and it wasn't until they came up with the concept of having really superpowered priests that they finally won the war, and the vampires, the few that remained, were sent on reservations. Now, if you caught that last part there, it's signaling, that kind of signals what this movie really is. This is a Western. This is a classic Western. Just replace Apache, Cheyenne, Navajo, any other Indian tribe with vampires, and that is the movie you're watching, because it's politically incorrect to have, Indians getting off the reservation and going around killing people nowadays. So we have vampires instead. And I'm not even kidding there. This film is literally a full-blown Western with Indians going off the reservation, going crazy, killing people. Just instead of having cowboys, they're cyberpunk Catholics with a slightly Western tinge. And instead of Indians, there's monstrous vampires. You gotta give it some credit for that. It's slightly original, kind of. But yes. But the war has won by these priests who apparently can just do superpowered stuff. How these priests came about, it sounds like they were just recruited. Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't go, let's find really good people beforehand and have them be a specialized unit. I would have figured by the time they developed nukes, it would be kind of easy, because the vampires apparently live in these giant hive things. So you figure, and apparently they talked about having radiation damage and all that stuff in one scene. So you kind of figure, you would have thought the war would have been won once the humans developed bunker busting nukes. But hey, it's kind of an out there sci-fi alternate world thing, I guess. I guess I can buy that, or I don't know. But they still don't really explain where the priests come from. The Seterist people that have talent. But alas, one vampire winds up kidnapping the daughter. Oops. Spoiler alert! I'm going to put that at the on the in the description now. Yeah, yeah. Paul Bentley's character, who's just known as Priest, he has no other name. His brother is attacked. They kidnapped his niece, who we later find out is his daughter. That actually, it's not a problem with the plot. That actually kind of flows. And he goes out. The church itself is denying that there's any problems. So he breaks with his order, goes out, decides to go rescue his niece. The church sends out more priests to go track him down. They find out that there's going to be an attack on the human settlements. Ergo, the main plot. Paul Bentley is basically doing the Jason Statham thing where he just plays the same character in every movie, but he's in a movie where that character tends to fit, so I can't complain too much with that. Carl Urban, he's fun in the few scenes he's in, but you really need more explanation into his character. We're given a little bit, but he really needed some more character development scenes. Understanding what he went through. He's just kind of there as like the villain, but he's kept in mystery for so long that by the time we really figure him out, we don't get the character thing. I think they really should have explained that stuff much earlier on. Who else? What else can I say about Brad Dourif is in this film. Yeah, he literally plays basically a snake oil salesman. Just replace snake oil with like religious artifacts that he says will keep the vampires away. It's always fun to see Brad Dourif and stuff. Christopher Plummer basically plays the priest. That's the head priest or the head clergy, Monsignor of the church, and well, basically, yeah, he's the I'm going to ignore what the problem is type of guy. He did an alright job. It is, and I've seen the Film Brain review. It is kind of a by the numbers plot, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're a person that hasn't watched. If you don't see way too many movies, then that whole it's repetitive, it's been seen before thing isn't really a problem. I think that's one of the problems that sometimes as a reviewer you have if you watch a lot of movies, then stuff does seem more boring when they kind of do by the numbers. But if you're a person that doesn't see so much stuff, you're not used to all the by the numbers stuff. So if you're somewhat interested and you haven't seen a lot of films like this, then the plot will seem kind of interesting probably. Because the characters really are not developed well. I will say that. There's one or two that we can kind of get, but they don't have a whole wide range of emotions, which can be a big problem. Like Maggie Q's character. Actually, Maggie Q might subtly have the most development, although it's not very well explained, where she kind of shows up halfway through, and she's supposed to have feelings for Paul Bentley's character. She does kind of more articulate the struggle she's having being kind of rejected from society, because apparently the priests, unlike, making them, the church is apparently afraid of their power after the war is over, so they disband them. Now, mind you, I said they put the vampires on reservations. You figure maybe instead of disbanding them, or it's actually not even clear whether they really disbanded, because they're talking about exiling them from the order, and they're still under their vows, so it's more like they've been deactivated. I think that's probably the word they should have used. But yeah, apparently they gotta go out and find jobs, and like the only jobs that they can get, because people are somewhat afraid of them, you would figure that, I don't know, the church would find the purpose. I mean, they are a church, and these guys are holy priests. Stick them in a monastery at least, make a little castle somewhere for them, and stick them there, keep them there, and if there's a problem, vampires act up again, knock on the door and have them go out. Seems like a much more plausible way to handle that than to disperse them into the population. Because if you're afraid of them, the best thing to do is put them with a population that you can maybe that they can affect. But oh well, that's what they did. Now I know this is based on a graphic novel. I did not see the graphic novel, so and I heard that the vampires in this are very different than the vampires in the novel. Now I tend, as a personally, I tend to avoid original source material before I see a movie, just so that I can judge a film based purely on the film itself. And sometimes it's a good thing, because I saw Watchmen. I purposely waited till after I saw Watchmen before I read the book, and I liked the changes that they did in the movie. Other times, like The Last Airbender, my review is not as harsh as that would have been had I seen the original source material first. Because I think I gave that a meh review when I first did it, and now after I've seen the series, I'm like, they've completely butchered that shit. It's horrible. But I have to say, though, I do like the visual style. Now, I kind of do like this kind of Judge Dredd, if you've seen those Blade Runner kind of look to films. I don't like the oversaturation of the market with that stuff. If there was a ton of stuff, I get very bored of it. But I do like this look occasionally in films. And I especially like how it's very kind of combined with this medievalish... it's not like really a fusion, but an undertone of kind of medieval and Gothic architectures to a degree. It's very dark in the cities, which, yeah, that's the other thing. They actually crammed in a quick environmental message into this film, where it's like, the vampires, but they won't be able to take over. It'll be daylight. There is no more sunlight in the cities, because they're belching out like pollution, and therefore there's a big dark cloud over the cities. And this is going. In addition to all the religious context, they're throwing in environmental messages. Very by the numbers of what you're supposed to put into a Hollywood plot nowadays. I think that's required in Hollywood, to have like an environmental message in every single film. But I should get into the effects. I was talking about the visual side. I really love it. It's very interesting. Very reminiscent of Blade Runner, or it really actually, you could look at this as this would be the Judge Dredd universe if they were hardcore Catholics. Most apt description I can think of it. But I like the look of the cities, even like the smaller towns, how they had this kind of post-apocalyptic but not quite post-apocalyptic look to them. That makes sense. The CGI, the CGI in the vampires is noticeable. The rest of it's kind of acceptable, I would say, because it's mostly environmental CGI. And it's I guess it is kind of hard to build an entire city as a prop, but would have liked to see some more model work, because apparently this film had a huge budget. There is obvious. I know I mentioned before I had seen the Film Brain, and there is very obvious cuts where this film was probably intended to be an R-rated film, but probably after the studio saw that it didn't have this great character development and stuff, they probably decided to make it a PG-13 just to get in the teen audience, which I think was a mistake, really, because when I was in the theater, it was older. Everyone in there was older. The people that were interested in this film were all older. I almost feel like them dumbing it down to PG-13 probably is going to hurt their bottom line, and I think that's a comment on the film industry itself, and how the studios are not getting the fact that within these next few years, it's not the young demographic that are going to be the ones going to theaters. It's not, and there's starting to be talk of this now, that it's actually older audiences. It's people over 25. It's people in their 40s, and they're the ones that'll go to these movies, and we'll see we'll see stuff like this, because just because they're older, they're not the World War II generation that are going to want more tame flicks. This is a generation that grew up with Star Wars, that flocked to see Star Wars when it came out, that flocked to see Indiana Jones. They like this kind of type of movie, this kind of big wacky horror stuff. It's not old. Doesn't have to be plumb and boring anymore. We've kind of, I think, I mean, I'm 25. As adults, we're kind of more willing to see this stuff, and I think even as adults, sometimes some of the reasons I go out to see the theaters, I want to get out of the house. It's something to do, and unlike a lot of the kids nowadays who would rather just kind of watch it on a laptop or something, I can go out and also, especially now with the recession, can't afford to see it stuff in theaters because of its insanely high ticket prices. Yeah, I think this is a mistake for them to do this because I think it is older audiences, but that doesn't mean it have to be boring films. I know I went off on a tangent there, but I think it had to be said. I might do a video on that about the changing kind of audiences. Studios are horrible at picking up on changing audiences. They're not very ahead of things. Let's see. Overall, though, the film, if it wasn't for the fact it was just in 3D, I would say it's an okay recommendation. If you are somewhat interested in the film already, you should probably go out and take a look at it. But because of the 3D and the fact that you're going to be paying extra for the 3D, I really can't recommend it because it's this horrible 3D. Wait for it to come out on Netflix or DVD, and it'll be alright. If you like the kind of a standard action film, it'll appeal to you. If you don't, oh, I almost forgot to make one quick little mention. There are like humans that kind of follow the vampires around. They're kind of like pale-looking dudes. Actually, there's two things. They really need to explain what Carl Urban was more, because he does walk around in the sunlight. He says he's a human vampire hybrid. I kind of thought all vampires are, from humans, so they already kind of are a hybrid. But yeah, it doesn't explain how he fits or what he's supposed to be. He's kind of like a daywalker, but they don't say it, or why they didn't see one of his kind until then. Maybe it was part of the stuff they cut out, but they really should have gone like, there was legends of us back into the years. Don't you see the priest? It was us, our kind, like kind of implying that maybe these priests are special. They're kind of tied, do something bigger. Now maybe that's again part of the comic book. That wasn't very well fleshed out in the comic book either. But hey, there was also the little thing they did call the little vampire human helpers familiars, which is a nice little Blade reference. And I think even if that wasn't in the comic book, that was probably a reference to Blade. Other than that, yeah, I think I've said just about everything I can. It's an okay film. Go get it on Netflix or something. Wait a few months. You're not going to miss much. Alright, signing off.